Peter Klaas's 1630 Vanitas is a beautifully symbolic painting. Vanitas themselves, a genre of the memento mori trope, which is Latin for remember you must die, are still life paintings from the Renaissance era, serving as a reminder of death or change and of its inevitability. One sentence that I read in almost every single analysis that I found on this piece on the World Wide Web is that its purpose is to, quote, remind viewers of the transience of life and the futility of pleasure in the certainty of death, end quote. I know, Klaas was just a ray of sunshine, right? Now, while virtually all artists and art enthusiasts agree that this piece is meant to discuss and almost embody death in its inevitability and escapability, there are quite a few intriguing interpretations on what the term memento mori advises us as philosophers and as humans who desire and search and long for a purpose to actually do with that reminder. When given the message, remember you must die, the theist, the one who believes in God as the first cause for all else and as the creator and sustainer of the universe, this message is actually encouragement, one to strive for a better and higher place in the realm of the hereafter, rather than focusing on the material worldly life. This view was very popular at the time due to the flourishing Christian and specifically Calvinist faith that would agree with these ideas. This goes to show that philosophy and faith really do go hand in hand. When it comes to the metaphysical questions of being and existence and reality, many renowned and esteemed philosophers, who all had very abstract and intricate views on said topics, from Aristotle to Anselm, all believed in God. In fact, John Calvin himself was actually a philosopher. However, I believe that this painting best fitted the Neo-Stoic movement that was also widespread and thriving during the Renaissance. The movement revived the idea originally founded by Zeno of Citium, who, rather than believing in the traditional immaterial soul, proposes that the soul and mind are actually material and corporeal and obey the laws of physics like the body, the brain, and trees and rocks and all else. Thus, Stoics believe that once we die, the soul dies with our body and we rot away into oblivion. Lights, camera, action.
So what do you think this painting means?
To me, it says we're all going to die and death is the end. It is a perfect depiction of monistic materialism. You see, the skull is a clear symbol of death, of human mortality. But the fact that it is placed among scattered, neglected, and seemingly unimportant inanimate objects, instead of, for example, a body being given a funeral or a burial or being cremated, like many traditions around the world that are meant to prepare the soul for the afterlife, is suggesting that the death of the physical body is the end of life, that the human body is no more than any other tangible object that exists only on a physical plane, no more than a glass or a watch or an old worn-out book.
Interesting. But what about the other objects? What do they tell us about human nature?
Well, the pocket watch represents time and its passage, independent and irrespective of all other factors, like whether or not we are there to witness it, which in metaphysics we call objective time, while the snuffled out candle symbolizes the end of human life, two classic objects we commonly find in memento mori still life. However, the object I found most fascinating was the overturned empty glass. You see, vanitas usually have an hourglass with sand falling, having a similar idea to the whole watch and candle with the whole time is running out, the inevitable is imminent, doom and gloom kind of thing going on. Yet here, Klaas chooses to replace it with a regular glass.
Why did he do that? What does it mean?
Well, the thing is, hourglasses can be turned upside down, and just like that, the process starts all over again. Sort of like the idea of reincarnation, for example. To me, the hourglass leaves true room for interpretation of the continuation of the soul, the idea that even once the body dies, or the sin has reached the bottom of the glass, the soul can continue on with and without it and separate from it, which is like flipping it over once again. Klaas's choice to remove the hourglass and replace it with a regular glass proposes that once the drink is spilt, just like life, that is all and there is no furthermore. Lights, camera, action. Now, let's talk music. Quite a few songs also discuss the intricacies of the soul, its existence, and its nature, and have a way of touching the human heart and moving our emotions, yet can still hold completely opposing perspectives. The 4th of July from Sufjan Stevens' Carrie and Lowell album, released in 2015, is such an art, loved by many who enjoy the melancholy and meaningful music. The profound lyrics illustrate a dialogue of sorts from the night he lost his mother, who he never really had a healthy connection with and never really felt he experienced affection from until he spoke to her as she lied upon her deathbed. They spoke of life and death, a part of it that is ultimately inevitable, exactly like in Klaas's Venitas, which is clearly communicated through the melodious repetition of the lyrics, "We're all gonna die," throughout and at the end of the song. Yeah, seems like purpose and depression are two very prominent themes today. But obviously, these lyrics moved many listeners. Yet, people often overlooked a reappearing theme, which is the fundamental questions of metaphysics about the body, the soul, and the mind, and the human being in general. Now, despite the similarities between Stevens's The 4th of July and Klaas's Venitas, like I mentioned, these two gentlemen hold completely different views on the metaphysical questions I mentioned. We first see this in the first verse, where Stevens says about speaking to his late mother, "The evil it spread, like a fever ahead. It was night when you died, my firefly. What could I have said to raise you from the dead? Oh, could I be the sky on the 4th of July?" Now, the fact that he is speaking to his dead mother sort of already hints at the idea that perhaps just because she is physically gone, that doesn't mean that nothing at all remains of her. That perhaps we are indeed more than our bodies, and that there is a part of us that continues to live even after death. Furthermore, the line, "What could I have said to raise you from the dead?" suggests that, to him, death isn't the end. Much of Stevens' impressions of his mother's passings and where she is now, if she still exists at all, can be explained through his faith as someone with a Christian background. Christian thought, like many other religious thoughts, believes in the metaphysical duality of the material body and the immaterial soul. And they believe that the immaterial soul continues on even after death in the passing of the physical body. But what does Stevens' faith teach him about what happens to the soul? Well, his perspective on this is reflected in part of the second as well as the third verse of the song, which, by the way, has very subtle but intriguing metaphysical perspectives. So the second verse says, "Sitting at the bed with the halo at your head, was it all a disguise like junior high? Where everything was fiction, future and prediction, now where am I, my fading supply?" Obviously, the first line about the halo at your head implies that he sees her as an angel. This completely opposes the stoic and materialistic nature of Venitas, where the soul, if it exists at all, is an extension, if you will, of the physical, material human brain. Rather, him comparing her to what many denominations of Christianity actually consider to be completely incorporeal, immaterial beings suggests that not only does the non-physical exist, but it also can manifest independently and is perhaps more fundamental than the material aspects of humanity. His view that both the material and immaterial exist, whether bound together or not, rejects both idealist and materialist or physicalist monism, instead encompassing the metaphysical theory of dualism, which is best represented in our final verse, which reads, "The hospital asked, should the body be cast before I say goodbye, my star in the sky? Such a funny thought to wrap you up in cloth. Do you find it all right, my dragonfly?" See, to most, this is just a very sad verse about parting ways with his mother. But to us philosophers, this verse screams Rene Descartes, heaven and hell, and possibly even the idea of reincarnation of the soul. Now, let's discuss that last one first. If you notice throughout the song, he calls his mother my dragonfly, my firefly, and my star in the sky. In one way, this could represent different things and beings that he might believe his mother has reincarnated as. However, I perceive the firefly and dragonfly to represent her being a light or a happiness in his life, while the star in the sky is symbolic for heaven. He sees her as shining in a place high above, watching over him, a common thought for Christians when losing a loved one. This interpretation also makes more sense to me as it aligns better with his faith and its belief in heaven and hell, wherein all righteous believers are permitted into paradise. This belief of not only heaven and hell, but the soul in its nature before and after death actually reflects on that of many metaphysical philosophers. Ibn Sina's view of the mind and soul, for one, aligns with the lyrics pretty well. He believes that our physical senses die when we die, but our mind and soul lives on, freed from the shackles of the physical body. Like Stevens, Ibn Sina sees the soul as immortal in a way, continuing after death, unharmed by the loss of the physical body. However, I think it is Rene Descartes' views who aligns more specifically and perfectly with Stevens' views of his mother's death. Descartes holds that the corporeal body and the incorporeal soul are made of two fundamentally different substances, also known as substance dualism, and that while the body is divisible, the soul is opposingly and completely indivisible. Personally, my view of the soul and of human nature aligns best with the theory of dualism between the material and immaterial, and thus does it align best with the 4th of July rather than Vanitas, as a person of the Islamic faith. As a Muslim, I believe in the afterlife and a soul that lives on after the body, similar to Ibn Sina and Descartes. Although both medias are very intriguing to me, I think the song does win for me. Thank you for listening.